Welcome to the Daugherty Water for Food podcast. Since 2010, the Daugherty Water for Food Global Institute at the University of Nebraska has worked toward one goal, a food and water secure world, one in which global food security is ensured without compromising the use of water to meet other essential human and environmental needs. It's a daunting vision, but one that's vitally important. This podcast amplifies the voices of those making waves in this space. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for joining us here for this first episode of the new Daugherty Water for Food podcast. I'm your host, Cindy Zimmerman, and I'm so excited to be able to introduce you to some of the wonderful people who are making a difference in our world today. We're starting off this podcast series by profiling some inspirational young women leaders in water for food. You can't help but be inspired by 21-year-old Louise Mabulo of the Philippines. She's an award-winning chef, farmer, and agricultural advocate. Louise promotes sustainable agriculture and farm-to-table cuisine and was recently recognized as a Young Champion of the Earth by the United Nations Environment Program and named by Forbes as one of their 30 under 30 social entrepreneurs for 2020 in Asia. Molly Nance, Director of Public Relations and Communications for DWFI, talked with Louise about her remarkable accomplishments during a recent webinar.
Let's begin with your background. How did a young woman from the UK end up building a culinary program and sustainable agriculture project in the Philippines, all well before you turned 20?
Well, hi, Molly. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited for today's session. Now, to tell you about my journey, it began when I was a 12-year-old on this television reality show called Junior MasterChef. And I was this little munchkin, and the show, well, it catapulted my career into an early culinary career. Basically, in my whole teens and a lot of my younger years, I was kind of like this culinary prodigy here in the Philippines. And I was kind of the youngest member of some elite culinary organizations. And I was really, really young. And as a young person, like Gen Zer, millennial, kind of like right on the border of that, I felt that having a successful culinary career alone was just not enough. I'd always been passionate about ingredients and about sourcing them well and growing them yourself. Like when I was 14 years old, it was the first time that I got into agriculture because I invested in cows. And from there, I learned about the magic of turning water and soil into your friends and growing them into your own food. So since then, farm-to-table cuisine had always been my platform, my advocacy, and supporting locally grown ingredients, which I served up at my place called the Culinary Lounge. Now, it wasn't until December of 2016 that I was fully immersed in agriculture and kind of thrown into it when my town was hit by Typhoon Knock 10. And this destroyed 80% of agricultural land in my town. And it was kind of then that I knew that I had to do something to rebuild livelihoods sustainably through resilient crops and responsible farming practices and support local farmers. So that effort ultimately led me to building my social venture, which is the Cacao Project. And we're rethinking our existing food systems and harnessing the power of our forests to create resilient and climate smart livelihoods to position our farmers for sustainable success.
What led you to initiate an entire relief program at your young age?
When I started the Cacao Project, it wasn't like a social venture that I'd planned. It was a typhoon relief effort. So when I started, I had to utilize social media and call out to friends and family, and we were able to raise funds to get assorted vegetable seedlings to our farmers. So we had help from the local government, and we reached out to farmers who needed assistance, and they also acted as an expert resource for us at the time. And we also had the local agricultural councils to help us further on with training programs when we started looking at cocoa as a long-term resilient crop to grow. Now, I also reached into my own personal savings, kind of bootstrapping it when it became apparent that I had to become a social venture. We had a yearly typhoon. We were right in the typhoon belt here in the Philippines. And with the climate issues, it's worsening every year. And we knew that it was a project that was in for the long haul. We had to continue protecting farmers and doing something that would support them in the long term.
Wow, that was a terribly devastating typhoon. And I imagine it might have been difficult to get farmers to see the value in producing cocoa trees or even joining your efforts as a very young woman. Did you run into some challenges there?
When I first started, a lot of farmers looked at my project and they thought, why would we change now? They looked at it with a healthy dose of skepticism, and they would say, why would we listen to this young girl who's suddenly telling us that there's another choice? And we initially worked with a smaller group of farmers, and a lot of them were already growing cocoa trees in our area, but they weren't propagating them for commercial use. It's just kind of, they just let it grow wild. And we put them through training programs on cocoa farming, and we put them through sustainable farming programs, and we tried to propagate their crops for more harvests. And after some time, they began reaping harvests and seeing results. And not just from the crops that they newly planted with us, from the vegetable seedlings that we gave in the cocoa, but from existing crops that they were growing. They were suddenly seeing a larger kind of harvest and every harvest season. And so they were applying these techniques and seeing all this growth and all these produce, and other people started seeing the benefits. Other farmers who were initially kind of skeptical of us, and they thought, hang on, people are starting to make money out of this. So, okay, we'll give it a try. So at the moment, we're working with over 200 farmers, and we planted over 85,000 trees over a span of 85 hectares of land. And it's improved the diversity of the crops growing in our area, and the soil quality improved too. Now, in fact, after Typhoon Not 10, which was the typhoon I'd mentioned earlier, since we planted so many vegetable crops, people had so many harvests from these vegetables that we had this abundance of food. And we were the only town with that abundance of food, that we were the only town with a decline in crime rates after this disaster that struck, because we were addressing a basic need, which is really food and hunger.
You created this fantastic project, and now we've all been hit with another global challenge in COVID-19. All of us, including our farmers, are dealing with this. It had a devastating impact on the entire food system. How has quarantine and other public health measures affected you and your community and your farmers?
Yeah, as you know, when the pandemic started, it triggered this like global knee-jerk reaction to change or to do something about it. And obviously we didn't act fast enough because the pandemic took away a lot of businesses and jobs. And the only important thing in these times is health, food, and water, really. And it's kind of highlighting the need for food security. And now there's kind of I noticed in time there was a spotlight on agriculture when people started realizing how important food was. And many industries plummeted, but until now, agriculture and food is still there. At the start of quarantine, as you mentioned, we dealt with a glut of produce. It took a while to figure out how to move food and how to utilize food. And in my municipality, what happened was that farmers had so much produce with the cacao project, with everything that we did. And a lot of the restaurants were shutting down, a lot of hotels shut down, so they lost suppliers. So we resorted to kind of a barter trade system here with other farmers. I said we kind of lived in a mini bubble of paradise. We had so much food. But what we did do was work with the local government. So the local government here, what they did was to address the food security crisis. They bought food and produce from the farmers instead of canned and processed food. And this was distributed to the community as relief goods. Since we were locked down, people couldn't go to work. This was kind of the relief goods that they had to give, so people had food every single day. So not only were we maintaining farmers' income, but we also utilized local produce and gave it to people so they had a fresh supply of food that kept people healthy. But now as time went on, we learned to kind of adjust and digitize and use this time to improve our approach and our communications plans and highlight the value of our food systems really to the audiences now that are at home.
That's just fantastic. And it's amazing to see how quickly you've made a difference, helping farmers, communities with much needed food and improving their own livelihoods at the same time. What do you see as challenges that are preventing more young people from pursuing careers in farming or raising livestock?
Well, I'm really glad you raised that question because one of the things that we're trying to address is that in countries like mine, or I don't know, in other countries as well, there's a stigma against farmers, and farming is often associated to either poverty, vulnerability, unsustainability. And that mindset kind of keeps people in that cycle. I mean, children here in the Philippines are taught in school that if you fail, you'll become a farmer. And so people have this idea that farming is not only associated to poverty, but it entails failure. And that's terrible. And it ties with immediate, immeasurable consequences in minds of children and in a nation about our food systems. So with the Cacao Project, one of the daunting undertakings that we're trying to execute is to deprogram this mentality from our culture and change not only the way we view food production, but the way we actually produce food so that we can break the cycle and create circular as well as regenerative and profitable ways to farm. And we want people to view food production as a noble career choice. And this task is like increasingly urgent now because every single day that goes by with the current age of farmers in the Philippines at 57 years old, we'll have an impending food security crisis in the next 15 years if we don't do something to kind of reform this industry.
Louise, do you think, as a female, as a woman, do you think it's harder for women to get into agriculture? Why don't we see more women involved in agriculture?
I think it's because I know biblically and historically, it's always considered kind of the man's role to make an income and bring it home to their families. And let's have to face it. We've been conditioned this way for the longest time. And it's difficult to break the confines of this idea we've been raised to believe. But what we can do is, to begin with, is to remove those barriers holding women away from the industry. Since we do have a lot to offer for farming and in agriculture and in water careers, it's just, if it's something that we had to kind of put our interest in. So women are kind of, I always say this, because as a chef and a farmer, I'm in male dominated industries, and they say that a woman's place is in the kitchen. But when you get into professional Michelin starred kitchens, suddenly it's this male dominated industry. But there's opportunity for us because we have different ways to showcase our grit and resilience. And it's up to us as women to prove that we can keep up to that standard and commit to this higher level that men uphold as well. And in the Cacao Project, just to mention that, we actually have 4 male staff, but they're all supervised by this one lady supervisor who is not only an amazing leader, but she has great ways to train and teach and empathize with a lot of the farmers that we work with. So there's really different ways that women in agriculture can maintain their careers, and there's different career options, not just in the ways that we traditionally see it.
Agreed. And I'm so pleased to see the exposure that you're giving to young people and women in the work that you do. We've talked a lot about challenges, but what's the other side of that coin? What do you find as exciting opportunities ahead in your future and the future for other farmers who are pursuing these kinds of projects?
Well, first of all, I'm really excited that the future is holding a lot for regenerative agriculture, and there's new kind of career opportunities that are happening because of this crisis and because people are more aware of our food systems. With the Cacao Project in our immediate future, we're eagerly expecting our harvest in this year, and we're really astounded to see that we're projected to mobilize and consolidate over 10 million pesos worth of cocoa. That's about, I think, 205,000 US dollars in the next year alone. And all of this is just from the humble beginnings of a local agricultural project in this developing country by a young person like me who 4 years ago struggled to earn any credibility in the agricultural space on a topic like this. But now we also have the opportunity to be at the forefront of platforms on speaking out on topics like agricultural policy guidances and in intergovernmental platforms. And we're speaking on these related issues about environment and how we can pioneer these practices in countries like ours in a way that's accessible and inclusive to everyone. Because really, I mean, agripreneurship, as I call it, which is social entrepreneurship in agriculture, is so much more than like being your own boss and controlling your own time and being cool, but it's also the chance to seize the opportunity to build a world that you envision, that you can integrate environmental stewardship in our work in agriculture to inspire community action and make a global difference. Because honestly, agriculture will always be necessary. We will need farmers 3 times a day, every day of the week. But in small ways, we can transform this industry to be inherently sustainable so that in doing so, we're benefiting both people and planet.
I got the opportunity to follow up with Louise and dig a little deeper into the Cacao Project and how agripreneurship might be able to catch on and make agriculture cool again. Hi, Louise. Great to meet you. You are a very busy young lady. And I'm just fascinated by the cacao project and can see so much potential there. So first of all, why don't you tell us just really about cacao itself, about the plant and the many products that can come from it?
With the Cacao Project, well, we started it to rebuild livelihoods here in my community since it was kind of like we were completely wiped out in December of 2016. 80% of agricultural land was gone. And we wanted to be able to do something to rebuild better and to diversify the crops that were already here in our land. So cocoa is, well, it's not well known that it's resilient, but by observation, you can kind of see it after the storms. You can see that it's one of the last remaining trees still standing. The pods are still there, and it kind of regenerates really fast compared to coconut and rice. So it's not a complete loss after storms and typhoons. And with cocoa, well, a lot of products come from it. You can create wines and vinegars. You can create chocolate, of course, cocoa butters, oils, and the leaves. Now, I just recently discovered you can turn it into fabric and furniture, which is a really exciting byproduct since we have a lot of leaves that are pruned off of the trees. There's quite a lot of opportunities with cocoa, and we're looking to create our own products within the next year or two, particularly chocolate bars, but then we also look into making cocoa butter, which is a lot more expensive and will fetch a higher price for the farmers. And eventually, I think, well, we're looking to export it and kind of sell it to chocolate factories and cafes here. So it's an exciting project that we're looking forward to within this next year.
Well, do you think that that type of project could be implemented in other regions and other countries?
Oh, definitely. I've already had offers to implement it in Indonesia, which is quite exciting. They're a really large cocoa producer. But at the moment, since my capabilities are in my town, I want to be able to show results and to kind of create this model here before I actually expand it to other places. But it's definitely easily to replicate it in other places. And I really hope that other people kind of pick up on that and create similar models, because it's not just for us. It's really it's a worldwide movement that's regenerative agriculture and, helping farmers, not just with just cocoa, but you could do it with jackfruit, with moringa and all sorts of other crops.
The whole system, the sustainability system, also includes the short-term crops that you have, like bok choy and okra and pumpkins. Other crops could be integrated into this type of system.
Definitely, we've got farmers with like a really diverse range of crops and produce. Some have papayas, some have coconuts, some have put it next to their rice paddies. It's just all sorts. It's whatever suits your environment and your ecosystem best.
So with a short and long term crops like that, then you
Yes.
kind of don't have all your eggs in one basket, right?
No, definitely not. And it's a lot more secure for them, I feel. And I mean, it's improving the diversity of our ecosystems and the soil quality. So you can put like peanuts as a nitrogen fixer, or madre de cacao. I'm not sure what the English word is, but it's called mother of cocoa, and it grows well with cocoa, and it helps feed the crops and makes your soil a lot fatter, as we call it here.
How did you get connected with Water for Food, and what do you see as their role in helping to improve sustainability for agriculture around the world?
Well, I think almost a year ago, I received a message from Molly Nance, who I've had the pleasure to meet and speak to. And it's like I know her in person, despite all our communications being digital. And I saw Water for Food online, and I read about it. And I was just so inspired that there's this entire institute that's not only based in Nebraska, but it's global. And they're researching ways that water can be, water management and water use can be improved, because it's relevant to food security all around the world, especially for people doing work like ours. It's just vital that research continues for that. And I mean, in the Philippines, agriculture isn't exactly considered this point of research, or this point of, like, people won't think of much information or much knowledge that comes from it. And it's resources and institutes like this that really provide us with knowledge and the technology that we need, especially in developing countries, to continue the work we do, since developing countries provide a lot of the world's food.
You used the word agripreneurship.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. Talk more about that term and how you envision that concept for other young people.
So agripreneurship is really incorporating entrepreneurship with agriculture, since we see a lot more entrepreneurs who are kind of venturing into the sphere of agriculture. In my country now, it's starting to become a trend, agripreneurship, where we kind of utilize agriculture and view it not as, because agriculture, if you think about it, is kind of a business in a sense. You need to make profits, you need to put in investments and everything. And people don't exactly view it as that in my country. And now kind of young people are starting to see that it's not just, food production. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And agripreneurship is really anyone associated to the food production system, whether you're in logistics, in water, in providing materials for that. And I see it in the future as something that young people can view as a profession that they really want to be in, because here people don't exactly view agriculture as a noble profession. And it's quite frustrating to me, because I see that, I consider myself a farmer, and a lot of people here would look at me and say, well, you're ruining your life and your career and your future by being a farmer. And I said, no, it's not the case, because there's so much opportunity in agriculture and farming. It's just we don't view it as a noble profession or something that's cool in a sense that young people want to be in. And agripreneurship is kind of the movement that's making more young people interested in this field. And not just that, but it's really coming up with innovations and technologies that can help improve the movement of regenerative agriculture or agriculture as a whole.
Right, making agriculture cool. I like that too. And it's, of course, not just the Philippines where agriculture is not considered cool or a noble profession or something that young people would like to get into. So what is your advice for young people and women, especially in other countries, about the importance of agriculture and how they can make a difference and look at the agriculture industry differently?
Well, I kind of view it as a stewardship, because it's really important. It's food systems. We rely on farmers 3 times a day, every single day of our lives, and we need food. And if young people didn't get into agriculture, we'd have food security crises. And women have so much to contribute, since we have a different perspective on agriculture, not just the way that men view it, but there's all sorts of career opportunities. It's diverse. And another thing that I always say is, well, for me, I always say this to young people, is that agriculture is a direct indicator of God's blessings on a nation. And we all play a part in that. It's important. It's not just agriculture and food, but it's protecting our soils, protecting our earth, and stewardship to the environment. It's all interconnected.
That is a very nice way to think of it. Let's talk a little bit more about the Cacao Project and any of the challenges that you might have faced when you were starting the project and how you faced them.
Oh, definitely. Well, challenge-wise, there's been quite a lot until now. I always talked about how stigmas were an issue, where it's so hard to get credibility. For example, for funding with the venture, people would look at me and say, well, you don't look like a farmer, or I don't think you'd be invested in this because you're a young woman and it's not this career choice that a woman would go into. So I feel like it's not something that you would, it's not a stable investment. So that's an issue that we'd have to face in the earlier years. And until now, sometimes I still get that. And credibility, people would look at you and think, oh, I don't exactly think that I would like to learn sustainable agriculture or train under people like you, because you're young and you're a woman, and I would usually look to an authority figure. So that was a big challenge to begin with. A lot of the farmers weren't exactly keen on getting into it and changing their farming practices, because they've been so used to typical farming practices that have been done, or they get corporations as their source of information, and that usually means just selling them more pesticides, insecticides, and fertilizers, and that's another issue that we've had to face. So it's really changing perspectives and showing people that there are other options, and regenerative agriculture can be profitable, and that these simple farming practices that you could bring in. In fact, we've had a lot of traditional farming practices that have been kind of phased out because people thought, oh, I want technology, I need chemicals in my farms, and they think that that's better. But a lot of traditional farming practices can actually come back and would be good. For example, in my town, we've been known to use chilies as an insecticide because we have so many chilies. Our region is known for growing chilies, and people have stopped using it because they think chemicals are superior, but that's caused soil acidification and a degradation in soil quality. and it's been problematic to a lot of us. So it's really teaching those and showing people that a lot of local practices that have been done by our elders and previous generations are still relevant today, and it's still important that we practice some of them and preserve some of them, and that farming and a lot of the things that we do are quite credible.
Yeah, biocontrols that people used in the past before they had chemicals. Well, you use the term regenerative agriculture. We're hearing that a lot more.
Yes.
Explain how you would define that and how it relates or is different or is the same as sustainable agriculture.
So it's pretty much the same as sustainable agriculture. It's really giving back to nature more than you take from it. It's farming practices, techniques that you utilize so that you don't degrade the soil and you're able to kind of contribute to the biodiversity, to the environment. You don't harm nature, and it's working with nature to create food and produce. So with the Cow Project, it's we're using agroforestry techniques that's really utilizing the wild. We have wasps and bees, and it's how it contributes to each other, or using the cattle that we grow, the manure, and how things just sprout out of it, and restoring land. So we had a lot of barren land that's been unused. It's kind of tilling it and reusing it so that it has an economic purpose and building economic trees in there. So it's really regenerative agriculture. There's so many different ways that you could do that. And it's not necessarily new, because people have been eating for ever since mankind was created, but it's only recently that agriculture was considered unsustainable, because we've been taking a lot from our soils and we've been experiencing a lot of soil degradation. And regenerative agriculture is really not using farming practices that degrade soil or contribute to acidification or to carbon emissions, and it's just sustainable farming, really, in essence.
As far as the Cacao Project is concerned, you said you're putting all of your efforts into that right now. Where would you say you're at as far as the project is concerned, and where do you see it going, and how you keep it moving forward?
Well, at the moment, we're approaching our very first harvest season from the moment that we'd distributed the first batch of cocoa seedlings. But we've always been harvesting cocoa for the past few years. It's just in a smaller scale. But now we're waiting for the biggest harvest this year, which is exciting. We've built our training center, our processing center. We're currently putting up a processing center for chocolate so we can make our own chocolate products. And it's really exciting to see the potential and how it's begun to unfold, because this came from a time of devastation. This is a project that started when people thought, the future was bleak and hopeless because there was just a typhoon that hit us. And now we've experienced 2 major typhoons since, and we're still going. It's still quite resilient, and we're still looking forward to these harvests on schedule. And it's really exciting to see how we're going to slowly kind of shift the perspective on cocoa farming and agriculture, not for youth, for women, and slowly create sustainable and regenerative agricultural products that we hope to export in the future.
Are there any ways for other people who are hearing this to get involved with the Cocoa Project and find out more?
Definitely. You can contact me directly. My name is Louise DG Mabulo on most media streams. You can check out our website, which is, at the moment I'm using my website, which is thereallouisemabulo.com. But I have an Instagram account for the Cacao Project, which is fairly recent because of the pandemic digitizing everything. And it's called the Cacao Project PH. And you can kind of see us and contact us. And if you want to get involved, definitely, we're open to volunteers and researchers to come in. And we really encourage more people to be part of our project and our growth and our journey.
Yeah, expand on that a little bit more. You mentioned using social media and how has that helped you reach more people?
Well, social media now, everyone's on social media. They're really connected. And it's a really useful way that's free to just network and get the information out and spread our message. So with the Cacao Project, I don't really mind if other people develop their versions of the Cacao Project and use our models and systems, or share information about regenerative agriculture that might, touch people who want to do something about that. So it's really been helpful. And lately I've been seeing a lot more young people posting that they're proud about farming and that they're harvesting things, and that they've started their own backyard gardens because of the pandemic. And it's really encouraging to see that these campaigns and movements are starting to work. And the Cacao Project has been a part of that from the beginning of this journey.
And moving forward, making agriculture cool again. That's all the questions I have, Louise. Anything else you'd like to add that we didn't touch on?
I think it's just important that viewers understand that we can't make agriculture cool until it's sustainable and until we find ways to produce food on a mass scale that's regenerative, because I hope that will be the future of food really in the next few years. And I mean, I've read recently that we've got less than 60 years of harvests left because of soil degradation. And that's concerning because I mean, I would just reach my senior citizenship then, but then my children and, my grandchildren would not have a sustainable food source. And I'd find that very concerning.
Thanks for joining us this time on the Daugherty Water for Food podcast. Make sure to visit our website, waterforfood.nebraska.edu, to view show notes or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes.